The charcoal made a soft, scratching sound against the paper, and Natalie Anderson barely noticed the footsteps that had stopped somewhere behind her 15 minutes ago. She was too absorbed in capturing the way light fell across the marble sculpture before her, the Renaissance masterpiece that had drawn her to this corner of the Metropolitan Museum of Art on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, shading and blending, bringing the two-dimensional sketch to life with depths and shadows that matched the real thing. She had no idea that Logan Jameson, CEO of Jameson Holdings and one of the most successful real estate developers in New York City, stood frozen 5 feet behind her, captivated not by the sculpture she was drawing but by the concentration on her face and the elegant movement of her hands. Logan had come to the museum on impulse, escaping back-to-back meetings and the suffocating pressure of closing a deal worth hundreds of millions. His assistant had looked shocked when he announced he was leaving for the rest of the afternoon, but he needed air, space, something real. The museum had always been his refuge since college, a place where beauty existed without spreadsheets or profit margins. He had been wandering through the European galleries when he spotted her, sitting cross-legged on the marble floor despite the nearby bench, completely absorbed in her work. He had meant to walk past. Instead, he stopped. Then he stayed. The minutes ticked by. 15 became 30. 30 became 45. Logan watched as she switched from charcoal to a softer pencil, adding fine details to the sculpture's face. Her own face was a study in focus, dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, a smudge of charcoal on her left cheek. She wore paint-splattered jeans and a simple cream sweater, looking nothing like the polished women who usually crossed his path at charity galas and business dinners. She looked real. She looked like she belonged to something bigger than money or status. When the hour mark hit, Logan realized how absurd this was. He was standing behind a stranger in a museum, watching her draw like some kind of stalker. Yet every time he thought about walking away, something held him in place. Finally, he cleared his throat softly. Natalie jumped, her pencil skittering across the page and leaving an unintended mark. She twisted around, eyes wide, and found herself looking up at a man who could have been carved from the same marble as the sculptures around them. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. He wore an expensive suit with the tie loosened, top button undone, looking both polished and slightly undone at the same time. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, his voice deeper than she expected. "I didn't mean to startle you." Natalie pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammer. "It's okay, I just get really focused when I'm working." "I noticed." He hesitated, then gestured toward her sketchbook. "I've been watching you draw for the past hour." "That sounds creepier than I meant it to. I couldn't look away. You're incredibly talented." She felt heat rise to her cheeks, partly from the compliment and partly from the intensity of his gaze. Most people glanced at street artists or museum sketchers and moved on. This man looked at her like she was the most interesting thing in the entire building. "Thank you," she managed. "I come here a lot to practice. The lighting is perfect, and the sculptures don't complain about holding still." A smile transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "Better models than people, I imagine. Way better. People fidget." She turned back to her sketch, trying to fix the stray mark, but she was too aware of him now. The air felt charged. Logan knew he should walk away. He had a dinner meeting in 3 hours, emails piling up, a conference call with London that he was probably already late for. None of it mattered. "Can I buy you a coffee? There's a cafe downstairs. I promise I'm not a creep, despite the hour-long hovering." Natalie looked up at him again, studying his face. There was something vulnerable in his expression, unexpected in a man who carried himself with such natural confidence. She made decisions with her gut, always had, and her gut said yes. "Sure," she said, starting to pack up her supplies. "But only if you tell me why you really stood there for an hour instead of just saying hello." They sat in the museum cafe with overpriced lattes, and Logan found himself telling her the truth. "I was trying to work up the courage. You looked so peaceful, so completely in your element. I didn't want to disturb that. And honestly, I couldn't remember the last time I saw someone that focused on something they loved." "What do you do?" Natalie asked, cupping her hands around her mug. "Real estate development," he said, which was true but felt inadequate. He didn't want to launch into his job title, his company, the buildings with his name on them. Not yet. Lots of meetings, lots of paperwork. Nothing as beautiful as what you do. "I'm a freelance illustrator," she said. "Children's books mostly, some editorial work. It pays the bills barely, but I love it. I come here when I need to remember why I chose this path instead of something sensible. Sensible is overrated. Says the real estate developer," she teased, and he laughed. They talked until the cafe staff started stacking chairs, the sky outside darkening to evening blue. Logan learned that Natalie had grown up in Boston, studied art at a small liberal arts college, and moved to New York 3 years ago with nothing but a portfolio and determination. She shared a cramped apartment in Brooklyn with 2 roommates and a cat named Picasso who hated everyone except her. She loved old movies, terrible reality TV, and Indian food so spicy it made her cry. Natalie learned that Logan had built his first real estate business at 26 with money borrowed from his grandmother, that he grew up in Connecticut, and that he secretly preferred museums to clubs and quiet evenings to fancy parties. He was surprisingly easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh until her stomach hurt. When they finally left the museum, the city was alive with evening energy, lights reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. Logan didn't want the night to end. "Can I see you again? You could have my number," Natalie said, trying to sound casual despite the flutter in her chest. He pulled out his phone immediately and she rattled off her digits. When her phone buzzed with a text that just said Logan, she saved it with a smile. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Dinner, anywhere you want. There's a Thai place in my neighborhood that's incredible. Nothing fancy. Perfect." He watched her descend into the subway station, waiting until she was out of sight before heading to his waiting car. His driver, Marcus, raised an eyebrow when Logan slid into the back seat with a grin he couldn't suppress. "Good afternoon, sir. The best I've had in years." Natalie texted her roommate Sarah the moment she sat down on the train. "Just met the most amazing man at the museum." "Having dinner tomorrow. Is this real life?" Sarah's response came immediately. "Details. All of them." The Thai restaurant was exactly as Natalie had promised, cramped, loud, and serving food that made Logan's eyes water in the best possible way. She laughed at his attempt to handle the spice level she ordered regularly, and he loved the sound of it, unguarded and genuine. "You're really bad at this," she said, pushing her water glass toward him. "I'm reconsidering all my life choices," he gasped, but he was smiling. They shared pad thai and green curry, their knees bumping under the small table. Logan asked about her illustration work, and Natalie pulled up images on her phone, showing him the children's book she had just finished. The drawings were whimsical and detailed, full of hidden jokes and tiny Easter eggs for observant readers. "This is incredible," Logan said, zooming in on a spread showing a mouse detective investigating a cheese heist. "Have you published anything?" "2 books so far, working on my 3rd. The market is tough and I'm still building a reputation, but I'm getting there." She paused, then added, It's not exactly a lucrative career path, but it makes me happy. That's worth more than money, Logan said, meaning it. Natalie studied him over her curry. Is your work making you happy? The question hit harder than she probably intended. Logan set down his fork, considering. It's satisfying, building something from nothing, creating spaces where people live and work. But happy? I'm not sure I've thought about it that way in a long time. That's sad. It is, isn't it? He met her eyes. I think I forgot somewhere along the way that there was supposed to be more to life than the next deal. They walked through Brooklyn after dinner, the neighborhood alive with Friday night energy. Natalie pointed out her favorite bookstore, the coffee shop where she worked on illustrations when her apartment felt too small, the park where she went running on Sunday mornings. I love this area, Logan said. It has character, soul. Unlike Manhattan, she teased. Manhattan has its charm. But yeah, this feels more real. They stopped outside an old brownstone. This is me, Natalie said, gesturing to the building. 4th floor, walk up. No elevator, terrible water pressure, but the light in the morning is perfect for painting. Logan wanted to kiss her. The urge was overwhelming, but it felt too soon, too fast. Instead, he said, "Can I take you out again? Real date this time, not just dinner." This wasn't a real date. This was me trying to figure out if you were actually as amazing as I thought you were yesterday. And she was smiling, that same unguarded expression that had first caught his attention. More amazing. Significantly more. She did kiss him then, rising on her toes to press her lips briefly to his. It was soft and sweet and left him wanting more. "Saturday," she said, pulling back. "Take me somewhere you love, not a fancy restaurant or some place you think will impress me. Somewhere that matters to you." Logan thought about it. "Deal. I'll pick you up at 10. He took her to the Brooklyn Botanical Garden on Saturday, arriving early enough to beat the crowds. Spring was showing itself in bursts of color, cherry blossoms beginning to unfurl, tulips standing at attention in neat rows. They wandered the path slowly, and Logan told her about coming here with his grandmother when he was a kid. "She's the one who lent you the money," Natalie remembered. "She's the one who believed in me when everyone else thought I was crazy," Logan corrected. "She died 2 years ago. I still miss her every day." Natalie slipped her hand into his. "Tell me about her." So he did. He told her about Eleanor Jameson, who had been widowed young and built her own investment portfolio from nothing, who had taught him that money was a tool, not a goal, and who had loved gardens and museums and chocolate chip cookies. She insisted on baking from scratch, even when she could have afforded a personal chef. "She sounds incredible," Natalie said softly. "She would have loved you. She always said I needed someone who saw past the business cards and bank accounts." "Do people really not do that?" Logan gave her a rueful smile. "You'd be surprised. Or maybe you wouldn't be. When you have money, you learn pretty quickly that a lot of people are interested in what you can do for them, not who you are." "Is that why you didn't tell me your last name yet?" Natalie asked, the realization hitting her. "Or anything specific about your company?" He stopped walking, suddenly nervous. "Partly. I liked that you didn't know, that you just saw me as some guy who interrupted your drawing. It's been a long time since someone looked at me without calculating my net worth." "So tell me now," she said. "Full transparency, who are you, Logan?" "Logan Jameson. My company is Jameson Holdings. We develop commercial and residential properties primarily in New York, but we have projects in 6 states. I'm a workaholic who is trying very hard not to check his email right now. I have a penthouse in Manhattan that I barely see and a house in the Hamptons I use even less. I drive a car that costs more than most people's yearly salary, and I sit on 3 charitable boards mostly because I'm expected to. And somehow, none of that felt worth mentioning compared to just talking to you about books and art and terrible reality TV." Natalie absorbed this. Jameson Holdings. That's the company that just bought that historic building downtown, right? The one they're turning into apartments. The Whitmore building, yes. We're preserving the facade and original details while updating everything else. It's been a nightmare of permits and historical society approvals, but it's worth it. I read about that. It sounds amazing. She squeezed his hand. I'm not going to pretend money doesn't matter, Logan. I have student loans and a maxed-out credit card, and I eat ramen more often than I'd like to admit. But I'm also not interested in you because of your bank account. I'm interested because you spent an hour watching me draw and looked like you were seeing something magical. I'm interested because you actually listen when I talk, and you make me laugh, and you hold doors open for elderly people without thinking about it. You notice that. I notice a lot of things. He pulled her close, right there on the garden path with cherry blossoms drifting down like snow. I haven't felt this way about anyone in years, maybe ever. That's terrifying. Good terrifying or bad terrifying, the best kind. This kiss was different from the first. Deeper, more certain, full of promise. When they broke apart, Natalie was breathless. So what now? She asked. Now I want to spend every minute I can with you while trying not to come on too strong or scare you away with the intensity of what I'm feeling. She laughed. Well, at least you're honest. They spent the rest of the day together, leaving the garden for a late lunch at a deli where Logan insisted she try the pastrami sandwich that was supposedly the best in Brooklyn. She sketched him while they waited for their food, quick lines on a napkin that somehow captured the set of his shoulders and the thoughtful expression he wore when people watched. I'm keeping this, he said when she slid the napkin across the table. It's a napkin. It's the first drawing you made of me. That makes it priceless. Sunday morning, Logan texted her at 7. I know it's early, but I can't stop thinking about you. Coffee, Natalie, who had been awake since 6 working on an illustration deadline, smiled at her phone. Come to my place. I'll make coffee, but fair warning, my roommates will interrogate you. He showed up 40 minutes later with pastries from a French bakery and a bouquet of tulips. Sarah opened the door, took one look at him, and turned to yell, Natalie, your museum man is here and he's even hotter than you said. Logan laughed, completely unfazed. I'm Logan, you must be Sarah. And you brought food, I like you already. She ushered him inside. The apartment was exactly what he expected. Cramped but cozy, walls covered in Natalie's artwork and her roommate's photographs, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. Natalie emerged from a bedroom with paint on her hands and an embarrassed smile. Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Come see. Her room was the smallest of the 3, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but she had set up a workspace by the window. An illustration was in progress, a dragon curled around a tower with a princess leaning out, not looking scared but rather annoyed. She's stuck in the tower, but not because she needs rescuing, Natalie explained. She's a scientist and the dragon is her research partner. They're working on a cure for a plague affecting the kingdom. I love everything about this, Logan said, studying the details. When kids read this, some of them are going to have their minds open to completely different possibilities. That's the idea. He wanted to pull her close and kiss her senseless, but Sarah and the other roommate, Jenna, were both hovering in the doorway, making no attempt to hide their curiosity. We're going to drink all your coffee and eat all these pastries if you don't come out soon, Sarah called. They spent the morning around the tiny kitchen table, Logan charming her roommates effortlessly while Natalie watched with growing affection. He asked Jenna about her photography, looked at Sarah's grad school textbooks with genuine interest, and insisted on washing the dishes when they finished eating. Okay, he's perfect and I kind of hate you, Sarah whispered when Logan was distracted by his phone buzzing. "Where did you find him?" "The museum. He literally just appeared. Keep him." But as the days turned into weeks, Natalie discovered that dating a CEO came with complications she hadn't anticipated. Logan's schedule was unpredictable, filled with meetings that ran late and business dinners he couldn't skip. He canceled their Thursday date because of an emergency with a construction site in Boston. Their Saturday plans shifted 3 times before finally happening on Sunday instead. "I'm sorry," he said for the dozenth time, looking genuinely frustrated. "This deal is taking over my life. 2 more weeks and it should calm down." "It's okay," Natalie said, and she meant it, but she also felt the distance growing between them, measured in missed calls and shortened text messages. The issue came to a head 3 weeks into their relationship when Logan had to fly to Chicago for a week. He texted constantly, called every night, but Natalie felt the absence like a physical ache. When he finally returned, showing up at her door at 10 at night with flowers and exhaustion written across his face, she let him in but didn't kiss him hello. "We need to talk," she said. Logan's stomach dropped. "Okay." They sat on her bed because there wasn't room for a couch. Natalie drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "I need to know if this is what it's always going to be like. You disappearing for weeks, canceling plans, us trying to fit a relationship into the margins of your schedule." "It won't always be this crazy," Logan started, but she held up a hand. "Don't make promises you can't keep. You're a CEO. Your company is growing, which means more deals, more travel, more demands on your time. I get that. I respect it. But I also need to know if there's actually room for me in your life or if I'm just something nice you fit in when you have a spare hour." The words hit him like a punch. "You're not spare time, Natalie. You're the best part of my day every day. The only thing getting me through this week in Chicago was knowing I'd get to see you when I got back. But you almost didn't come tonight. You texted saying you were exhausted and asking if we could meet tomorrow instead. And then I realized I couldn't wait 12 more hours, so I came anyway. Logan." Her voice was soft but firm. "I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I'm already there, but I won't be in a relationship where I'm always second place to work. I've watched my friends do that, watched them slowly disappear into someone else's schedule until they don't even recognize themselves anymore. I won't do that." He reached for her hands. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to figure out what you want. If you want us, you have to make space for it. Real space. Not just late nights and canceled plans and phone calls from airports." Logan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're right. I've been treating this like I treat everything else, trying to squeeze it into my existing life instead of reorganizing my life to include what actually matters. Give me a week. Let me figure some things out. A week, 1 week. And I promise, I'm not asking for time to decide if I want this. I already know I do. I'm asking for time to fix how I've been doing this." Natalie studied his face, seeing the determination there. "Okay, 1 week." He kissed her then, slow and deep, trying to pour every ounce of feeling into it. "I'm not losing you, not when I just found you." The next morning, Logan called an emergency meeting with his executive team. His coup, David, looked concerned when Logan walked into the conference room at 7:30. "Everything okay, boss?" "No," Logan said honestly. "I've been running myself into the ground, and more importantly, I've been so buried in work that I'm about to lose something that matters more than any deal we're closing. So here's what's going to happen. David, you're being promoted to president. You'll handle day-to-day operations, all the minutiae that's been eating my time. Rebecca, you're taking over the Chicago project entirely. I trust you completely. Mark, You're going to start screening my meeting requests and cutting anything that doesn't absolutely require my presence." The room was silent. Finally, Rebecca spoke. "What brought this on?" "I met someone," Logan said simply. "Someone who makes me want to actually live my life instead of just working through it. I started this company because I wanted to build something meaningful. Somewhere along the way, it became the only thing I had. That changes now." David leaned back, a slow smile spreading. "About damn time. We've been worried about you." "I've been worried about me too." The restructuring took exactly 5 days of intense work, training, and transition meetings. Logan delegated ruthlessly, discovering that his team was more than capable of handling responsibilities he'd been hoarding. By Friday afternoon, his calendar looked radically different. He showed up at Natalie's apartment at 6, 2 days ahead of schedule. She opened the door in paint-stained clothes, surprise and hope warring on her face. "You're early." "I couldn't wait. Can we talk?" They sat on her floor because Natalie had been working and her bed was covered in illustrations. Logan took a breath. "I restructured my entire company this week. Promoted my COO, delegated major projects, hired a better assistant who actually tells me no when my schedule gets insane. I'm still CEO, still involved in all major decisions, but I'm not drowning anymore. And more importantly, I cleared my evenings. All of them. Barring actual emergencies, I'm done at 6. Natalie's eyes widened. "Logan, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You were right. I was trying to fit you into my life instead of building a life that includes you. I want this, Natalie. I want us. I want to come home to you at night and hear about your day and watch terrible reality TV and just be present. I can't promise there won't be busy times or the occasional crisis, but I can promise that you'll never wonder if you're second place again." She launched herself at him, kissing him hard enough that they both fell backward onto the floor. "You're kind of amazing, you know that? I'm just a guy who knows a good thing when he finds it." They spent the weekend in Natalie's tiny apartment, barely leaving except for food runs. Logan met Picasso, who, despite his reputation for hating everyone, immediately curled up in Logan's lap and purred. Sarah declared it proof that he was a keeper. Sunday evening, as they lay tangled together in Natalie's small bed, Logan said, "Move in with me." She propped herself up on an elbow. "We've been dating for a month. 5 weeks. And I know it's fast, I know it's crazy. But I also know that every night I go home to that empty penthouse, I wish you were there. I want to wake up next to you. I want to give you space to paint, real space with perfect light and room for all your supplies. I want to trip over your shoes in the hallway and find your coffee mugs in weird places and argue about what to watch on TV. Logan. I'm not saying you have to give up your independence or stop seeing your roommates. I'm saying I have space that's going to waste, and you have talent that's cramped into a room the size of my closet. Let me give you a studio. Let me give you us full time." Natalie's heart was racing. Every practical bone in her body said it was too soon, but her gut, the same instinct that had told her to have coffee with him that first day, was screaming yes. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "This is huge. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready." But 3 days later, after talking it through with Sarah and Jenna, after making a pros and cons list that ended up ridiculous, because all the cons felt flimsy compared to the one big pro of being with Logan, Natalie called him. Okay, I'll move in, but I'm paying rent. Some amount, even if it's token, and I need that studio you promised." She could hear his grin through the phone. "Deal. When can you pack?" The penthouse was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern design, but what made Natalie gasp was the second bedroom Logan had already converted. The walls were painted a soft cream, the lighting was perfect, and an entire wall of storage awaited her art supplies. A drafting table sat by the window with a view of the city skyline. "When did you do this?" she breathed. "I might have started planning it the day after I restructured the company. Too presumptuous. It's perfect." Moving in together was an adjustment. Logan was meticulously neat in a way that bordered on compulsive, while Natalie left a trail of creative chaos wherever she worked. They negotiated, compromised, and slowly found their rhythm. Logan learned to love the sight of her paint-stained coffee mugs. Natalie discovered that he sang off-key in the shower and hogged all the hot water. 2 months in, Logan brought her to a charity gala his company was sponsoring. It was her first real introduction to his world, and Natalie was nervous despite the designer dress he'd insisted on buying her. "You look incredible," Logan said as they arrived at the venue, a historic hotel in Midtown. "But more importantly, just be yourself. Anyone who matters will love you." The evening was overwhelming. Wealthy socialites, business moguls, politicians. Everyone wanted a piece of Logan's time, and Natalie watched him navigate it with practiced ease, always keeping one hand on her back or intertwined with hers, making sure she was included in every conversation. An older woman in diamonds approached, looking Natalie up and down with barely concealed curiosity. "So you're the artist everyone is talking about. Logan hasn't brought anyone to an event in years." "Natalie, this is Margaret Chen. She sits on the board of several museums," Logan introduced smoothly. "Actually, I've been following your work," Margaret said, surprising her. "You did the illustrations for the Dragon's Laboratory, correct? My granddaughter is obsessed with that book." They fell into easy conversation about children's literature and art, and by the time Margaret moved on, Natalie felt more confident. Logan leaned down to whisper, "See, you belong here just as much as anyone," but not everyone was as welcoming. A woman named Victoria, sleek and polished in a way that screamed old money, made a point of touching Logan's arm and reminiscing about some business trip they'd taken together. "We had such fun in Singapore," she purred. "Remember that incredible dinner at Marina Bay?" "I remember a 14-hour negotiation that nearly fell apart," Logan said dryly, moving closer to Natalie. "Victoria, this is my girlfriend, Natalie." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How sweet. What do you do, dear?" The condescension was clear, but Natalie had dealt with this type before. "I'm an illustrator, children's books." "Oh, how charming, like a hobby." "Like a career," Natalie corrected firmly. "One I'm quite proud of." Logan's jaw tightened. "Natalie has published 2 books with a third on the way. Her work brings joy to thousands of kids. I'd say that's more meaningful than most of what happens in this room." They excused themselves shortly after, Logan steering Natalie toward the bar. "I'm sorry about her. Victoria is interested in you and threatened by me," Natalie supplied. "It's fine. I can handle some jealousy. You're handling all of this remarkably well. Did you think I'd fall apart? I thought you might realize this world is exhausting and want to run screaming." He was only half joking. Natalie turned to face him fully. "Logan, I didn't fall in love with your world. I fell in love with you. This is just part of the package. Besides, I met some genuinely interesting people tonight. That curator from the Whitney wants to see my portfolio." His expression softened completely. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. They hadn't said it yet, not explicitly, though it had been obvious for weeks. "I love you too," Natalie said, and kissed him right there in the middle of the gala, not caring who saw. Life settled into a beautiful pattern. Logan kept his promise about work-life balance, coming home at reasonable hours and leaving weekends sacred. Natalie's career was flourishing, her 3rd book selling even better than the first 2, and she had started getting commissions from major publishers. They cooked together, badly but enthusiastically. They explored the city on weekends. They fought occasionally, usually about Logan's tendency to try to solve all her problems with money when sometimes she just needed him to listen, but they always worked through it. 6 months after she moved in, Logan took her back to the museum where they'd met. They stood in front of the same sculpture she'd been sketching that day, and he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks, trying to figure out the perfect moment," he said. "But then I realized the perfect moment was right here, where everything started, where I saw you and knew, even though it made no sense, that you were going to change my life." Natalie's breath caught. "I love how you see the world. I love your terrible taste in reality TV and your paint-stained fingers and the way you leave coffee mugs in the weirdest places. I love that you make me want to be present, to actually live instead of just work. I love that you're not impressed by money or status, but you light up when you talk about art or story or the perfect way light hits a building. Natalie Anderson, will you marry me?" The ring was perfect. A simple design with a blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Artist colors, she thought dimly, but mostly she was focused on his face, on the vulnerability and hope she saw there. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her while a security guard politely looked away, and an elderly couple passing by broke into applause. They were married 4 months later in a ceremony that blended both their worlds. The venue was the Brooklyn Botanical Garden. The guest list a mix of Logan's business associates and Natalie's artist friends. Sarah was maid of honor, David was best man, and Picasso made an appearance in several of the official photos. Natalie wore a simple dress with lace sleeves and carried tulips. Logan cried when she walked down the aisle, not caring who saw. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, Logan promising to always make time for what mattered and Natalie promising to call him out when he forgot. At the reception, Margaret Chen gave a toast about the power of art to transform lives. Sarah told embarrassing stories about Natalie's college days. David revealed that the entire executive team had bet on how long it would take Logan to propose, and that everyone had underestimated how quickly he'd fall. "I knew the moment I saw you watching her," David said during his speech. "You looked like someone had finally woken you up after years of sleep." As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Natalie whispered, "No regrets. About you. Never. About everything else. Just that I didn't find you sooner. You found me exactly when you were supposed to." Life as a married couple brought new joys and challenges. They talked about starting a family, but decided to wait a year, wanting to enjoy just being together. Logan surprised her with an exhibition opportunity at a small gallery in Chelsea, displaying her original book illustrations. The show was a success, selling out the first night, and Natalie cried happy tears while Logan held her and told her he'd always known she was brilliant. Natalie surprised him by learning about real estate development, asking intelligent questions about his projects, and sometimes offering creative solutions he hadn't considered. When Jameson Holdings was designing a new mixed-use development in Queens, she suggested incorporating public art installations and a community garden. The idea was so well received that it became a signature feature of all their future projects. They traveled together, combining business trips with vacation time. In Paris, Natalie sketched while Logan took meetings, and they spent evenings wandering museums and eating too much cheese. In Tokyo, they got lost in the city together and stumbled upon tiny galleries and perfect restaurants. Every trip became an adventure. A year and a half into their marriage, Natalie found out she was pregnant. She told Logan over breakfast on a Sunday morning, simply sliding the positive test across the table while he read the newspaper. He stared at it for a full 10 seconds before looking up at her, eyes wide. Really, really. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she confirmed, and they held each other, laughing and crying and already imagining the future. Pregnancy was complicated. Natalie had terrible morning sickness for the first trimester, and Logan worked from home as much as possible to take care of her. He rubbed her feet, made grocery runs at weird hours for bizarre cravings, and talked to her growing belly every night. "You're going to be so loved," he told their daughter during one of these nightly conversations. "Your mom is going to teach you to see beauty in everything. She's going to show you how to be brave and creative and true to yourself, and I'm going to do my best to give you a world worth living in." "No pressure on the kid," Natalie said, running her fingers through his hair. "Just promises I intend to keep." Their daughter, Eleanor Rose Jameson, named for Logan's grandmother and Natalie's love of flowers, arrived on a snowy February morning after 12 hours of labor. Logan stayed by Natalie's side through all of it, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to leave bruises, whispering encouragement when she was sure she couldn't go on. When they finally placed Eleanor in Natalie's arms, the baby had Logan's eyes and Natalie's dark hair. She was perfect. "We made her," Natalie whispered, awed. "You made her, I just helped a little. Team effort." Logan kissed his wife's forehead, then his daughter's, overwhelmed by the love he felt. "My girls." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and magical. They took turns with night feedings, both of them walking the floors at 3 in the morning with a crying baby, delirious with exhaustion but unwilling to trade the experience for anything. Sarah and Jenna were regular visitors, bringing food and babysitting offers. David and the executive team sent a massive gift basket and gave Logan an extended paternity leave without argument. Natalie struggled at first, trying to balance being a new mother with her illustration work. She felt guilty when she worked and guilty when she didn't, pulled in too many directions. "Talk to me," Logan said one evening when he found her crying in the nursery. "I'm a terrible mother," she said. "I spent 2 hours painting today while she was napping, and the whole time I felt like I should be doing something else. But then when I'm with her all day, I feel like I'm losing myself." "You're not a terrible mother. You're an amazing mother who also happens to be an artist. Those things don't cancel each other out." He sat beside her, pulling her close. "What if we hired some help? A nanny for a few hours a day, just so you have dedicated work time without the guilt. That feels like failing." "It's not failing. It's recognizing that you're a person with needs and dreams beyond being a mom, and that's actually a beautiful thing to teach our daughter." They hired Maria, a warm woman in her 50s with years of childcare experience. The arrangement transformed everything. Natalie had guilt-free work time, Eleanor got socialized with other babies at the park, and Logan came home to a wife who was happy and fulfilled instead of frazzled and resentful. Eleanor's first word was "Mama," but her second was "draw," pointing at Natalie's sketchbook. Logan pretended to be offended that "Dada" came third, but secretly he loved that his daughter was already showing signs of her mother's artistic nature. As Eleanor grew from baby to toddler, the penthouse filled with her personality. Finger paintings went up on the fridge next to Natalie's professional work. Toys scattered across previously pristine floors. The second bedroom, once Natalie's studio, was converted to a nursery, and Natalie took over a spare room on a lower floor of their building as her new workspace. For Eleanor's second birthday, they threw a party in the botanical garden where they'd been married. Eleanor, wearing a crown of flowers, smeared cake all over her face, and laughed with pure joy. Logan looked at his wife, at his daughter, at the friends and family surrounding them, and thought about how different his life looked from what he'd imagined. "Happy?" Natalie asked, slipping her hand into his. "Happier than I knew was possible." When Alina was 3, Natalie published a new book, one she'd written herself rather than just illustrating. It was about a girl who loved to draw and the magical worlds that came to life from her sketches. On the dedication page, it read, "For Alina, who shows me magic every day. And for Logan, who taught me that the best love stories start when you're not looking." The book became a bestseller. Natalie went on a book tour, and Logan rearranged his schedule to come with her, Alina in tow. They made it an adventure, exploring new cities as a family, Alina's eyes wide at every new sight. One evening in San Francisco, after a successful bookstore event, they walked along the waterfront as the sun set over the bay. Alina was on Logan's shoulders, pointing at seagulls and boats, chattering constantly in the way only a 3-year-old could. "Remember when you said you weren't sure if your work made you happy?" Natalie asked. Logan thought back to that conversation years ago in the Thai restaurant. "I remember. Are you happy now?" He looked at his daughter, then at his wife, both of them golden in the sunset light. He thought about his restructured company that ran smoothly without consuming his life. He thought about evenings at home, weekends in the park, bedtime stories and breakfast chaos, and all the small moments that made up a life. "I'm so happy I sometimes can't believe it's real," he said. "You changed everything, Natalie. That day in the museum, you changed everything." "We changed each other," she corrected. "I learned that love doesn't have to mean sacrificing yourself. You learned that success isn't measured in deals closed but in moments lived." Alina chose that moment to grab Logan's hair and shriek, "Daddy, look, big boat." They laughed, redirecting her attention, continuing their walk as a family. Behind them, the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and ahead, the city lights began to twinkle on. Years later, when Alina was 7 and her little brother James was 4, they would return to that same museum where Logan and Natalie had first met. Alina, showing early signs of inheriting her mother's talent, wanted to sketch the sculptures. James, more interested in dinosaurs and trucks, tolerated the art appreciation with the patience of a child who knew cookies would be involved eventually. They stood in front of the same sculpture, and Natalie pulled out her old sketchbook, the one with that first drawing she'd been working on the day they met. "This is where we found each other," Logan told Alina, who was setting up her own smaller sketchbook. "That's so romantic," Alina said with the dramatic flair of a 7-year-old who'd read too many fairy tales. "It was," Natalie agreed. "Your dad stood behind me for an entire hour before he was brave enough to say hello." "An hour," Alina giggled. "That's so long." "Best hour I ever spent," Logan said, wrapping an arm around Natalie's waist. James, tired of standing still, tugged on Logan's hand. "Daddy, can we see the dinosaurs now?" "Natural History Museum is next week," Logan promised. "Today is art." They spent the afternoon wandering the galleries, Alina sketching periodically, James making up stories about the people in the paintings, Natalie and Logan following along with the easy contentment of people who'd built something real and lasting. That evening, back in their penthouse with both kids finally asleep after the usual chaos of dinner and bath time and bedtime stories, Logan and Natalie collapsed on the couch together. "We should have another museum day," Natalie said. "Just us. Like old times." "Get Sarah to babysit next Saturday." "Perfect." Logan pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with paint and kid chaos. "I still can't believe you said yes. To coffee, to moving in, to marrying me. All of it. I can't believe you stood there for an hour. What were you thinking about, honestly? I was thinking about how you looked like you belonged to something bigger than yourself, how focused you were, how beautiful, and I was terrified that if I said something, the spell would break and you'd be disappointing in person. Was I? You were so much better than I imagined. He kissed her temple. Every day with you is better than I imagined. Natalie shifted to look at him properly. You know what I was thinking about that day? I was thinking about how I was almost out of charcoal and couldn't afford new supplies until my next commission check cleared. I was worried about rent. I was wondering if I'd made a huge mistake moving to New York to chase this dream. And then some creep interrupted your drawing. She laughed. The best creep I ever met. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other deeply. From the nursery monitor, they could hear James making soft, sleeping sounds, and from Alina's room, silence meant she was actually asleep for once. Do you ever miss it? Logan asked. Your old life before me, before all this? Natalie considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity sometimes. I miss my cramped apartment with Sarah and Jenna, staying up too late drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. I miss the freedom of only being responsible for myself. But would I trade what we have? Not for anything in the world, even when James draws on the walls, even then. Besides, you have to admit his technique is improving. Logan groaned. Don't encourage him. He's 4. He's supposed to be making messes. Alina never drew on walls. Alina channeled all her energy into structured artistic expression from birth. James is more free-spirited. James is chaos incarnate. He gets that from you. Me, I'm the organized one in this relationship. Natalie gestured around the living room, which despite having been cleaned 3 hours ago was already littered with toys, art supplies, and the general debris of family life. And yet, look at our lives. Happily chaotic, Logan conceded. I'll take it. Saturday arrived, and Sarah showed up with her girlfriend Maya, both of them armed with board games and snacks to distract the kids. Alina was excited. James was suspicious until he remembered Sarah always snuck him extra cookies, and Natalie and Logan escaped with the giddiness of parents getting a day off. They returned to the museum, holding hands like they had years ago. Without kids in tow, they could linger at each piece, discussing art and technique and what moved them. Natalie sketched a bit, but mostly they just walked and talked in front of the sculpture where they'd met. Logan pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For saying yes to coffee. For being brave enough to move in with me after 5 weeks. For calling me out when I was drowning in work. For loving me even when I'm difficult. For Alina and James. For this life we built together. Natalie's eyes misted. You're going to make me cry in the middle of the museum. I'm just telling the truth. She kissed him softly. Thank you for standing behind me for an hour that day. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, not just as an artist or a potential girlfriend, but as a person. Thank you for building a life that has room for both of us to be ourselves. Thank you for being an incredible father and husband. Thank you for every day. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while museum visitors flowed around them like water around stones. We should probably head back soon, Natalie said eventually. Sarah can only handle James's energy levels for so long. 5 more minutes. Deal. Those 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 20, but eventually they made their way back home. They opened the door to find Alina teaching Sarah and Maya how to draw dragons while James had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from whatever chaos he'd inflicted. How was it? Sarah asked, looking up from her surprisingly good dragon sketch. Perfect, Natalie and Logan said simultaneously, and shared a smile. That night, after the kids were in bed and the apartment was finally quiet, Natalie worked in her studio while Logan caught up on some reading in the next room. It was their routine, being near each other even when doing separate things, the comfortable companionship of people who didn't need constant entertainment to enjoy each other's company. Around midnight, Logan appeared in the doorway of her studio. "Come to bed. 5 more minutes. I'm almost done with this spread." He'd heard that before and knew it meant at least 30 minutes. So he settled into the chair in the corner, the one he'd placed there specifically for these moments, and watched her work. Natalie glanced over and smiled. "Are you seriously just going to sit there and watch me draw? I did it once before. Turned out pretty well. You're ridiculous." "I'm in love." She set down her brush and turned to face him fully. After years of marriage, 2 kids, countless challenges and triumphs, he still looked at her the way he had that first day in the museum, like she was magic, like she was home. "Come here," she said. He crossed to her and she stood, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Logan Jameson." "I love you more, Natalie Jameson." "Impossible." They swayed together slowly, no music needed, in the studio lit by the city lights outside and the soft glow of her desk lamp. This was happiness, Natalie thought, not the grand gestures or the big moments, but this. Standing in her art studio at midnight with paint on her hands and her husband's arms around her, knowing that their children slept safely down the hall, and tomorrow would bring new adventures and challenges and ordinary magic. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. "That day in the museum, did you imagine we'd end up here?" Logan thought about it. "I imagined possibility. I imagined hope. I imagined that if I was brave enough to say hello, something wonderful might happen. But this..." He looked around the studio, thought about their children, their life together. "This exceeded every dream I didn't know I had." "Good answer. It's the truth." Natalie pulled back enough to look at him. "I'm starting a new book, a different kind of story. Tell me." "It's about a woman who's trying to make it as an artist in the city. She's struggling, doubting herself, wondering if she made the right choice. And then she meets someone who reminds her why she started in the first place. Not because he fixes her problems or saves her, but because he sees her. Really sees her. And that changes everything." Sounds like a story, I know. It's our story. With some fictional embellishments and a subplot involving a mysterious painting, because it's still a children's book and needs some adventure. But at its heart, it's about 2 people finding each other and building something real. Logan's chest felt tight with emotion. "I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to write it." She kissed him again, soft and sweet. "But right now, I'm ready for bed." They turned off the lights and headed to their bedroom, checking on the kids on the way. Eleanor was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off, surrounded by stuffed animals and sketch pads. James was curled in a ball, thumb in his mouth despite their efforts to break the habit, looking angelic in sleep in a way he never did while awake. In their own room, they got ready for bed with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this thousands of times. Logan set the alarm. Natalie plugged in her phone. They climbed into bed and found each other in the dark, Logan's arm around Natalie's waist, her head on his chest, their legs tangled together. "Best day," she murmured, already half asleep. "Every day with you," he replied. And there, in the quiet dark, with the city humming outside and their family safe around them, Logan thought back to that Tuesday afternoon in the museum. He remembered the fear of approaching her, the certainty that he was about to make a fool of himself, the way his heart had raced when she smiled at him. He remembered standing behind her for an entire hour, gathering courage, and he was grateful for every single one of those 60 minutes. Because they'd led to this. To her. To them. to a life richer and fuller and more beautiful than any building he'd ever constructed, any deal he'd ever closed, any success he'd ever achieved. Natalie's breathing evened out, sleep claiming her, but Logan stayed awake a little longer. He thought about the future, about watching Alina and James grow, about growing old with the woman in his arms. He thought about more museum visits and chaotic family dinners and quiet evenings in her studio. He thought about all the moments still to come, the ones they'd create together. And he thought about that sculpture, the one Natalie had been drawing, the one they now visited every year on the anniversary of the day they met. It was just marble and craftsmanship, but to him, it would always mean something more. It would always mean the moment his life split into before and after. Before Natalie, when he was successful but empty. After Natalie, when he understood what it meant to truly live. He pressed a kiss to her hair, whispered, "I love you," even though she was asleep, and finally let himself drift off. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to treasure. But tonight, he had everything he needed right here in his arms. The city lights filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. Down the hall, Alina rolled over in her sleep, and James's breathing stayed steady and peaceful. In the studio, Natalie's latest illustration waited for morning, the paint drying on a story about bravery and adventure. And in the master bedroom, Logan and Natalie slept wrapped around each other. Two people who had found each other in a museum and built a lifetime together, one day, one moment, one choice at a time. Because that's what love was, Logan had learned. Not just the grand gesture of standing behind someone for an hour before finding the courage to speak. Not just the dramatic proposal or the beautiful wedding. Love was every day choosing each other. Love was reorganizing your life to make room for someone else's dreams. Love was standing in a studio at midnight watching your wife paint because you never got tired of seeing her lost in her passion. Love was raising children together and figuring out how to be partners and parents and still individuals. Love was growing and changing and staying constant all at once. And as Logan finally fell asleep, his last thought was simple and perfect and true. He'd do it all again, every moment, every challenge, every joy. He'd stand behind her for 1,000 hours if it meant getting to live this life. He'd found her sketching in a museum and she'd given him everything. The end.